Good afternoon and welcome to the UCEA Executive Committee Interview Podcast. This is Daniel Moragas, Graduate Research Assistant at UCEA and doctoral student at the University of Virginia. I am here today to interview Dr. Okilwa as part of his candidacy for the UCEA Executive Committee. Today we will be hearing from Dr. Nathan Okilwa, Associate Professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies at the University of Texas at San Antonio. His research interests include issues of equity and access for underserved and underrepresented student groups, preparing school leaders that support diverse learners, influences of school, home, and community contexts on student outcomes, sociocultural context of education, educational policy and politics, critical policy analysis, and international organization of schooling. Welcome, Dr. Okilwa.
Thank you so much, Daniel.
You're very welcome. Let's begin with the first question. Please tell us about your background and your scholarship as it relates to leadership preparation and practice.
Yes, Daniel, I am grateful for this opportunity to share my experience and my background. And I'm really humbled that I was nominated to be considered to serve UCEA, this organization that we all cherish. So just a brief background, my accent tells that I'm originally from Africa, particularly Kenya. I born and raised there, and then I moved to the US for my graduate studies. And since then, and before coming here, I was a teacher back home in Kenya. So I did my master's at the University of Wyoming, and then my doctorate at the University of Texas at Austin. And in the process of doing all that, I was also teaching. So I have 15 years of teaching both special education, because my master's is in special education and general ed, in rural and urban cities or centers, in K-12 settings, elementary school, middle school, high school. And it's important for me to mention this because this kind of shapes the kind of work that I do today. So I just thought I should provide that context. So the kind of scholarship I do is definitely informed by those professional experiences and personal experiences as well. And I've done work around, or scholarship around discipline disproportionalities or disparities. And that work was informed by the time I was teaching at middle school in an alternative setting. That's when I was doing my doctorate at UT Austin. And when I left to enter into the professoriate, that gave me an opportunity to explore what I'd seen during my teaching years. And that resulted in a book that I co-edited called The School to Prison Pipeline. And that work even continues today because some of the authors of some of that work, we are still engaged in a conversation around discipline disproportionality, specifically trying to pivot the conversation a little bit to a more active voice, not just saying students of color are disproportionately impacted by policies, but looking at what are those policies and who is enacting those policies. So that conversation kind of targeting the actors that actually kind of perpetuate the disproportionality. So that's one work that I'm really fully engaged in. And again, it goes from my experience as a teacher. Another work that I'm really passionate about is around refugee students and their experiences in schools. And I got interested in that, one, because I come from a country that hosts a lot of refugees within our region. And when I came to, when I got an opportunity to be at the University of Texas, San Antonio, I got to know some of the kids, some of whom lived in Kenya as their second home. And they were so excited to see somebody that shares that experience with them in terms of where they came from before they moved to the US. So And so that work is an exciting work that I do today, and it all relates to the UCA goals, which is um, promoting social justice for marginalized students. That's the kind of work that I'm also passionate about. And related to that, I belong to the advising board of Refugee Resettlement Services, which is part of Catholic Charities um, here in San Antonio. And you can see the correlation between what I do in terms of service as well as scholarship. And just to highlight one more, I also do high need um, examining leadership in high need schools or contexts. So I belong to a consortium of scholars called International School Leadership Development Network, ISLDN, which are scholars from across the globe who examine leadership, school leadership in high need context. And that is always a highlight for me when I go to UCA, when I see these colleagues from all across different geographical contexts doing this work, and we kind of exchange ideas and compare and contrast our work. Let me just finalize by talking about, I also, in our department, I coordinate a master's degree program with one of our largest school districts in our area. And that is important because I know UCA is really concerned about developing school leaders that promote opportunities for our students. And in this program, we advance those ideas, we unpack those ideas with the school leaders. And I'm so excited that I get to be in the school district setting and environment. I engage with the school district, and that is important for UCA, that we engage with our communities. So those are just but a few of some of the things that I do scholarship-wise. As I've mentioned, a little bit of service as well, that is very connected to the mission and vision of or goals for UCA.
Thank you. Now, you've also served for several years as a plenary session representative. Tell us about your engagement in UCEA's governance.
Yes, so I served for 3 years, and during those 3 years, I engaged in the typical PSR type activities where we have conversation, particularly during the annual plenum sessions that we have during UCA conference. So we have conversation about just the general governance of UCA, and I participated in those conversations in terms of shaping the direction of UCA and all that. I also voted for full or associate members, and I'll seek, of course, the insight of my colleagues in our department in the voting process. And also communicating UCA news and initiatives to my colleagues as well as graduate students, because one thing that I really became so proud about UCA is how increasingly we've been trying to engage graduate students. And I'm so grateful for our former executive director, Michelle Young, who really pushed for that. And now graduate students are fully engaged in that. In the UCA family. So I'm excited to, when opportunities come and I need to inform them, I pass those along. But something that I feel during my time as PSR, is particularly during the annual plenum sessions, is it felt a little bit more as just sit and get type. And I hope, and maybe I'll talk about this later, that we can change that a little bit to activate the PSR in more than just during the annual and sessions where we sit and get most of the time. Figure out ways to really engage the PSR in a more active way, so that they can contribute actively in the governance of our organization.
Very good. And Dr. Okilwa, in what other ways have you been engaged in UCEA?
Thank you, Daniel. So that's a good question. So I got introduced to UCEA back in 2009 when I was a doctoral student at the University of Texas at Austin. That's when UCEA was headquartered there, and I was a graduate student there at that time. And I was teaching, and then towards the end of the kind of when I was getting close to my dissertation phase, I approached Michelle Young and asked if there was an opportunity for me to become a GRA, Graduate Research Assistant, or graduate assistant. And luckily at that time, an opening came along, and Michelle Young hired me as a graduate assistant for UCEA. So that's when I began getting involved with UCEA, and I loved it a lot as a graduate student. And the highlight of that experience was actually when we organized the conference in 2010 in New Orleans. And I have a lot of, and you can relate to this, Daniel, because you've been involved in setting up conferences, and that was close and personal for me, and just the nuances that go into that. And I learned that during my time as a graduate assistant, and that conference is always a highlight of my experience being a graduate research assistant. Another experience actually was when I was still a graduate assistant for UCEA, and I worked with Michelle Young when UCEA got the U.S. Department of Education FIPS grant. This grant was to develop curriculum modules for preparing leaders to support diverse learners. And I supported them, scholars from different institutions who, at that time, they will come to UT Austin, and they will have their conversation around the module. And it was just really amazing to see the conversation they were having in coming up with these modules. And these modules are available on UCEA website. In fact, I've used some of them, and it's so when I use them now as a faculty member, it's always exciting to look back and see that whole process that the people that were involved in producing these went through, the conversation, the intellectual, conversations that were happening at that time, and I was there to see that happen. So it's always exciting to do to use them and reflect back at that time. I also review conference papers and chair annual conference sessions and review manuscripts for UCEA journals, the typical work that most scholars do. And currently I serve as a Jackson Scholar Mentor, as well as I am an associate editor for the Journal of Cases in Educational Leadership. We acquired this journal from the University of South Florida. We put in a proposal, and we were awarded to host that journal. And so it's hosted here at UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio. And I'm one of the associate editors. And that's work that I take pleasure in doing that work, because we advance cases that get used in coursework for most of the professors in our field.
Thank you, sir. Can you discuss a little bit with us your scholarship, research projects, teaching, and or service that can inform the work of UCEA, particularly the work of the executive committee?
Yes, thank you, Daniel, for that question. I'm going to give just a specific example in relationship to scholarship, teaching, and service, just to highlight some of which I think are important. So with regard with scholarship, I feel like the work I do around school leadership for high needs schools is an important piece. I belong, again, just to emphasize, I belong to the International School Leadership Development Network, a consortium of scholars across the globe who look at these high needs schools. And I feel like that is an important piece for the executive committee, because especially UCA, we are interested in advancing our footprint just beyond the borders of the US. And so I feel like that work that I do around high needs schools within this consortium is an important piece that informs some of the initiative that UCA is engaged in. I'm going to talk about a piece of that much a little bit later, I think. When it comes to teaching, so our institution, University of Texas San Antonio, is a Hispanic serving institution. So there is a lot of students who are first gen students, meaning first time college going students. And I'm a faculty that identifies as that as well. So I think mentoring these students and highlighting some of the work that UCA does around kind of training, and training is not probably the best word, but working with students who have been marginalized for years to get to the table. In this case, faculty members, if they are going that route, or serving in settings that they serve in as practitioners, is important, and being able to navigate those. So I feel like I can identify with some of their challenges, and I help them navigate that in the process. And another one is with regard to teaching is I highlight some of the UCA, as scholars in the assignment of readings that I do, and which are very influential in this work around school leadership. So that's just another way in teaching that I feel I advance the work of the executive committee or UCA as a whole. And then finally, service as a program coordinator, as I earlier mentioned, is an important piece for our organization in terms of engaging with the communities in which we work. And I feel like this partnership that I help coordinate is an important partnership that I feel is within the mission and vision of UCA. I think I may have mentioned earlier that I belong to the board of advisors for refugee resettlement services for Catholic Charities, which I feel still is an important way of engaging with the communities in which we live. And prior to that, I served on an academy that serves students with intellectual disabilities. And that just speaks to how UCA is wanting our members to engage with communities in which we serve. So the local level and the state or national level, and in many other cases, international levels as well.
Dr. Okilwa, we're going to go on to our last question. And
Right.
I think you may have hinted at this already, but can you share the reasons why you have chosen to run for the executive committee and your vision for the future of UCEA?
Yes, so I mean, being called upon to and being nominated to serve this institution that we all cherish at this level, I feel it's a privilege and it's an honor, of course. And I feel like I'll bring, if given the opportunity, I'll bring in a different perspective. Having been born and raised in a different context, I feel like I have something to add to the conversation. And particularly, I would like to see UCA extend its footprint in the international arena. I mean, UCA already has that, but that's why I use the word extend its footprint. And particularly, again, for the continent of Africa. I was so excited when this year we were going to have a trip to South Africa. Unfortunately, events have turned that upside down. And I give credit to our current executive director, Monica Brand Jimenez, who has led this I think that the first trip was taken in 2018 to Cuba, and that's an important first step to engage places that are typically not engaged with UCA. For example, Cuba, that was phenomenal. I didn't go, but that was powerful, and I was really looking forward to the one to South Africa, just as a first step to engage with that continent. So I believe I've had conversations with other scholars in our field around how we can engage, a continent like Africa. Granted, the scholarship in the US around school leadership, it's the scholarship that kind of dictates the conversation. So we cannot shy away from engaging the global community where we can. And in this case, in Africa, we really need to do that. So I look forward to, if given the opportunity, to bring that conversation up and figure out ways we can engage, even if it means trips like those, and see how we can engage with scholars in those contexts that don't have a lot of resources like most other places to engage with the rest of the world. So I look forward to that initiative if I get a seat at the table. Yeah, exactly. And I want to highlight something that I experienced this summer I was attending a virtual international conference, and one scholar, a very renowned scholar in our field, well published, critiqued UCA journals by saying that UCA journals are not very friendly to international context related study. And I found that kind of strange, but that speaks to how the importance of engaging the international global community. And now specifically, for example, here at JSEL, Journal of Cases in Educational Leadership, which I'm an associate editor, we are trying to do that. We're trying to engage like this time around. When we're planning to go to Puerto Rico, we're thinking about how we can engage Latin American scholars, maybe have some of them curate a special issue. And so those are the first steps of engaging the global community. And one more would be related to the work that we do here at JSEL is engaging with the school district and practitioners. How do we engage with those? And we were thinking about even using this platform JSEL because we do cases. How can we put those cases in the hands of school districts that want to use them as professional development material? So I think those are conversations that I can have at the EC if I'm given the opportunity to have a seat at the table as well.
Well, we thank you so much for your time and your very thoughtful responses, Dr. Okilwa, and we wish you the best of luck. I hope you do get the seat at the table. We need that sort of advocacy. Just so you know, this interview will be made available to UCEA institutions and the plenum reps prior to the UCEA convention. And again, thank you so much for your time, and everyone listening, have a great day.
Thank you, Daniel.